We've heard a lot of conflicting opinions about this movie in the last few months. We already knew that the financial viability of the film was in question, given the reshoots it's gone through, the rewrites and the test screenings. We knew that there was a chance that this movie was going to flop at the box office, given that the last time we saw Sam Wilson, it was in a television show that had extremely mixed messages and questionable themes. We knew that Red Hulk against a very much human Sam Wilson was a terrible idea no matter what sort of tech from Wakanda that he had. Cap 4 had a lot going against it even before all of this. But despite all this, there was still the chance that I was wrong and had judged the movie prematurely. I was willing to accept the fact that I would have to eat crow if this movie proved me incorrect. And there was a part of me that hoped that I would have to, because I don't want to dislike MCU films. I'm a little tired of disliking what the MCU has given me in the last few years. It's exhausting having to watch what they've produced when we all know how capable they are of giving us good things. So with the whole survive until 2025 motto in full effect from Marvel's marketing team, when 2024 was pretty much a wasteland for MCU content, I think we were all hoping that this year would, at the very least, be better than what we have been given since Endgame. And unfortunately, this movie did not start the year off on a great note for MCU movies. Maybe the biggest reason for that was the fact that this movie tried desperately to recapture the feelings and the vibe of The Winter Soldier, which was a far superior film in every aspect. They beat for beat tried to copy the governmental espionage aspects with Sam taking the place of Steve, Joaquin taking the place of Sam, the character of Ruth Bat-Seraph taking the place of Black Widow, the character played by Giancarlo Esposito taking the place of Rumlow, and so on and so forth. But where Winter Soldier remained tight and grounded with a plot that was both believable and gritty, asking questions about the differences between freedom and fear and just how much control governmental agencies should have, Brave New World was simply about the revenge plot of a generic villain who is probably one of the worst villains the MCU has offered to date. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. The movie starts off with the election of President Thaddeus Ross, played by an 82-year-old Harrison Ford, who, at this point, seems to be just phoning it in and really should retire before he does any more damage as a part of a Disney project. He's in the midst of preparing to secure an important treaty for shared access to the material encapsulated in the celestial that is currently in the Indian Ocean and has a store of adamantium in it. However, Japan, France, and India all want a piece of the pie as well, and so tensions are high as the peace talks come to a close. In the meantime, Sam is conducting a raid in Mexico to secure a sample of the adamantium that has been stolen and is supposed to be picked up by Giancarlo Esposito's character. Of course, the movie takes the time to show off Sam's new suit, which apparently has the same design and capabilities of Ant-Man and Black Panther's suits, which really began to strike me as a lazy idea as the film went on. Of course, the movie continues to copy the same plot points as Winter Soldier, in that a friend of Sam's, Isaiah Bradley, who made an appearance in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is mind-controlled by the generic villain of the film and is caused to attack President Ross, who invited Sam to the White House in order to restart the Avengers. From here, Sam and Joaquin go on the run to clear Isaiah's name and uncover the plot by generic villain here to get revenge on Ross for events that took place in the Incredible Hulk movie that aired 17 years earlier. Oh, and there's also this character who doesn't really do much in the film, but is just there to fulfill the role that Natasha Romanoff left behind and is much less successful at it than she is. I won't talk too much about Ruth Bat-Seraph because while she wasn't insufferable like so many other girl bosses are, she's also 5'0", beating up 200-pound soldiers in the film and didn't really have much to do otherwise with the plot. And speaking of, it's easy to see that this movie was butchered on the editing room floor. Not only does it try so desperately to reclaim the magic and spark of other older, more well-crafted Marvel movies, but it's full of characters that we don't care about, villains that are laughable and pathetic, and a Red Hulk that was featured very heavily in the marketing of this movie and only showed up at the end for about 5 minutes and not really even as a villain character. There was no tension in the film. At no point was I on the edge of my seat watching with wide eyes to see what happens next. At no point was there an unexpected plot twist or something to keep me guessing. Instead, we have overbloated, ridiculous fight scenes between the new Captain America, who is somehow able to knock missiles out of the air without being splattered like a pancake, fancy suit aside, and a fight with Red Hulk where he somehow manifests the abilities of Black Widow to calm Red Hulk down, despite Sam and Ross having no connection whatsoever, and because the plot needed it to happen because Sam couldn't deal with Red Hulk any other way. It's like this movie was trying to tell us, yes, we know this isn't Steve Rogers. He's better. Look at all the stuff he can do with the fancy suit that we've given him. It has Ant-Man tech, Black Panther tech, and Falcon tech, and of course Cap's shield. And in case that wasn't enough to convince you, Sam's also a Hulk whisperer too. Gee, why on earth would President Ross want Sam to restart the Avengers when he's basically the entire team all in one? If that wasn't enough, we can also talk about the villains. Esposito's character, Sidewinder, or Serpent, or whatever his name ended up being, is probably one of the most disappointing aspects about the film. Remember this fight between Steve and George Batroc and Winter Soldier? Remember how tense and engaging and just how awesome that fight was? The fact that they got George St. Pierre to play him, an actual UFC fighter, just upped the ante on the whole fight and made Steve winning in the end that much more enjoyable. In Brave New World, the supposed comparison to that is Anthony Mackie and an Esposito who is 3 decades his senior. It's the same sort of logic that Gladiator 2 used when Paul Mescal's character fought Denzel Washington. Ridiculous, absurd, and downright boring. Esposito's a good actor, and he was pretty much wasted in this movie. He's in it for maybe 10 minutes, after the advertising suggests that he would have a much bigger role in the movie, and the plot would suggest that he had a much bigger part to play before it was hacked to pieces with the constant reshoots and rewrites. Then we have Samuel Stearns, a character from The Incredible Hulk, who was exposed to gamma radiation that was apparently supposed to make him super smart, and that Ross exploited for years, who now wants revenge on him. We're told that he is wildly intelligent, but don't get a single piece of that evidence on screen. He pretty much gives up at the end and even surrenders himself to Sam, leading to him spending the rest of his life on the raft and making himself totally forgettable. And then, of course, we have Thaddeus Ross himself, who isn't really a villain, but more of an anti-hero who is trying to do his best to turn his life around so he can be the man that his daughter Betty remembers. But the heart pills he had been taking to mitigate his condition that were given to him by Stearns somehow turned him into Red Hulk at the end of the movie, leading to a ridiculously bloated and over-the-top fight scene with Sam that made absolutely no sense and was just absurd. And speaking of Sam, unfortunately, his abilities, or lack thereof, were another part of why I just couldn't take this movie seriously. Not only should a fight with Red Hulk have never happened if this was a monster that Steve Rogers himself couldn't beat, but the movie expects us to believe that not only does Sam have the strength to knock missiles out of the air with regular old human power, but that his fancy suit from Wakanda is enough to withstand full-on hits from the Red Hulk without shattering every bone in his body from the sheer force. One of the reasons Winter Soldier worked so well was because it was gritty and grounded. Steve Rogers never performed functions that were beyond his capabilities and what the serum enabled him to do. He was either fighting regular guys or people with the same sort of capabilities as him. Brave New World expects us to believe that a very human Sam Wilson with a fancy suit that had an Ant-Man helmet, Falcon's wings, the Captain America shield, and Sam's regular strength can stand up in fights with the Hulk. The movie has the same sort of generic humor one might expect in a Marvel movie, but for a film that seems to be trying to copy The Winter Soldier, but with Sam at the helm, the attempted funny moments felt grating and out of place. It doesn't help that there's not nearly as much chemistry between Danny Ramirez and Anthony Mackie as there was between Anthony Mackie and Chris Evans, but I can only blame that on the writing more than anything else. This small lady that we're expected to believe was once a Black Widow is also present and doesn't do much but have one generic fight scene with a group of highly trained soldiers, and we're also supposed to believe that somehow they are the new Steve, Sam, and Natasha. She too was the victim of extensive cutting and material left on the editing room floor. Given more in-depth explanations and development, I might have been interested to see what they would do with her, but what you see is what you get, and that's pretty much nothing. Even though Winter Soldier was very much Steve Rogers' movie, the film also gave Natasha a decent character arc, giving her conflicting feelings about who she was working for and questioning whose lies she was telling. With Ruth Bat-Seraph, we get pretty much none of that, and I didn't even get a chance to see how good of an actress she is because there's pretty much nothing to work with. And in the end, Captain America Brave New World wasn't brave, certainly wasn't new, and caused me to question what in the world I was watching. It took the concepts that much better films had already done and twisted them into something silly and almost unrecognizable. It's filled with characters that didn't have any chemistry, plot points that went nowhere, and villains that were just plain pathetic. While I had hoped to like this film, I was also prepared for the worst after recent press about the movie's extensive reshoots caused it to be rewritten and redone multiple times. How else could you explain the ridiculous tech that Sam has in order to make the fight scenes with him and the Hulk longer than 2 seconds and a one-punch shot? How else could you explain the utterly pathetic villain and storyline that was cobbled together from previous takes until they had something that they thought was watchable? At this rate, whether or not Sam rebuilds the Avengers doesn't seem to matter much in the long run, because he's one of the few that's left that people seem to actually care about. I guess we'll just have to wait and see if the Thunderbolts can do what this movie can't. But somehow, I have a bad feeling about that movie too. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. What did you think of Captain America Brave New World, and are you excited for what's next? Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and let the conversations begin. Until next time, everyone.